The National Institute for Communicable Diseases is urging those traveling to high-risk malaria areas to take preventative medication. It's as infections rise due to increased rainfall and higher temperatures. Wits University Research Institute of Malaria's Professor Lizette Koekemoer joins us tonight. Professor Koekemoer, good evening. Thanks for your time. So, of course, by now we would, in an ideal world, living in a world that is malaria-free. We're not quite there yet. So tell me about these warnings then that you want particularly travelers to be mindful of.
Hi, Kathy, and thank you for having me with you and the listeners tonight. Yes, I think if you're living in Gauteng, you will look around and see the weather is cold and how is it possible for malaria to exist. But of course, during the year, and if you go further north, then the temperatures are higher. And this time of year, after the rains, the mosquitoes populations tend to increase again, and then the risk of malaria is always there. We have to also keep in mind that people will start preparing for the holidays. They will go for either visiting friends, family, or return home to neighboring countries. And then if they come back after the December holidays or visiting families, they might have pick up malaria in these places that they visited, and then they come back to South Africa. And this puts them at risk, of course, for contracting malaria. If you go to Mozambique, for instance, your risks are quite high. And then, of course, because there's transport between the different neighboring countries, either for work or holiday, we have the occasional mosquito that will come through our borders. And these mosquitoes are very clever. They actually hitch a ride in buses, suitcases, and then as soon as the passengers are sort of stopping in South Africa, the mosquitoes fly out. And we do have cases where people haven't traveled to malaria areas. If you look at people living in Johannesburg or Pretoria, and then suddenly you have cases in areas where we know we don't actually have malaria. And those are dangerous cases because even doctors, even if they ask the patient, have you traveled? The answer would be no, I didn't travel. So malaria is then normally not a disease that will be tested for. So this time of year until April roundabout, it remains a risk for contracting malaria, even if you haven't traveled. So the risk is low, but nonetheless, it's good to be aware of that situation.
Yeah, absolutely, because some of the figures still put malaria cases in South Africa, around the 10,000 mark annually. If those are correct, then the risk quite low. But are there particular high-risk areas in the country?
So, of course, for South Africa, our high-risk areas are all the parts where we border with our neighboring countries, where they might have higher incidence of malaria. We again think of Mozambique, parts of Zimbabwe, and so forth. Where your risks are higher. But of course, there's also a lot of transport. If you look at our border regions where all our border posts are, there's a lot of trucks for businesses going up and down, bus services. And those areas are normally at a higher risk. You also have the Kruger Park, that's at risk because high temperatures. And like you say, the cases are really low. But nonetheless, I think people need to be aware. So if they have the symptoms of malaria, that they do ask to be tested if they are in an area at a higher risk. So if you went to Limpopo, especially the northern parts of Limpopo, for instance, and you do become sick, is to ask for a malaria test.
And I suppose that's really, part of the point, right, that we shouldn't all now get paranoid and worried about every mosquito that we come across, but to just be that much more cautious if we're in high-risk areas.
Yes, so don't go into a paranoid state. Like you say, our cases are low. The country has a good malaria control program in place. There's good diagnostics within South Africa. But it's just for people to be aware. If you sit outside, use Cavart, try to use or other mosquito repellents. Try to wear long clothes. Protect yourself from mosquito bites, especially around your feet. That's what they like. To sort of get a nice blood meal, and that's when you do get exposed. There's, of course, lots of mosquitoes out there, but not all of them transmit malaria. So there's actually very few species that will be able to transmit malaria. So don't get scared with every single mosquito bite that you have, but be conscious. Look at the symptoms. If you have like fever-like symptoms, and of course it overlaps with we have COVID with also fever-like symptoms. And if your symptoms don't improve, or you know that you've been exposed in a malaria area, ask your doctor to please test you. And then even if your test is negative, but your symptoms are not improving, go back to the doctor and ask for another test just to be safe.
All right. Wits University Research Institute of Malaria's Professor Lizette Koekemoer.